People are swept away. They're wearing the mask when they're driving their car alone for the same reason I'm wearing my scapular. It's piety, okay? Unfortunately, their object of piety are the gods of the city and the spirit of the age. To break the Great Reset is to break the cordon. These forces of evil circle the world. We need everyone to push back where they are.
Hey, Jason Jones is going to be on the program today. He's got a book that releases today, The Great Campaign Against the Great Reset. That's coming up at 30 past the hour. We're going to have a conversation about sabotaging the Great Reset with Jason Jones from Movie to Movement, from the Vulnerable People Project. By the way, my name is Joe McClain. I host a radio program called A Catholic Take, where we look at the world through a Catholic lens. I'd love for you to hang out with us. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and let us know what you think in the comments below. Hey, I saw an article over at the Dallas Express. California mom wants child castrated without father's consent. And this is the kind of world we live in. And we live in a dystopian, upside-down world that says it's okay to castrate a boy. And speaking of this issue, there's a book out. It releases today called The Great Campaign Against the Great Reset by SophiaInstitute.com. Releases today, headed on its way to the New York Times bestseller, and author Jason Jones joins us now to talk about it. Good morning to you, Jason.
Good morning, sir.
Sabotaging the Great Reset. Jason, come on, man. What did Klaus Schwab do to you? Why did he deserve your animosity, good sir? Tell me about your book.
Well, what did he do to me? Well, I was the first American arrested leading an anti-COVID lockdown. So there is that. My family had to leave our home of Hawaii because I didn't want to be locked down for 2 years. So I never thought about maybe there is a bit of a personal vendetta in this book. So when I was rescuing Afghans, our former Afghan allies from Afghanistan, they were very eager to do American press while they were still in hiding in Afghanistan. And I would tell them, rescue, then retribution. We have to rescue you before we do our retribution. So, maybe this is an attempt at retribution at the globalists who shut the world down, who created the largest man-made famine since World War II, who want to inflict this on our posterity. There is an initiative by the World Health Organization to set up a permanent health dictatorship that will give them the power to lock down every country in the world at their whim, basically turning over our president, our governors, our sheriffs, our chiefs of police, and making them subordinate to unelected, distant bureaucrats that could shut down the entire country. I mean, something, power that the Soviet Union never had over its satellite states, the World Health Organization seeks to have over every country in the world.
Jason, they don't even hide it anymore. They actually talk openly about all of these agendas now. Now they're happy to admit their plans. It's pretty bold and audacious on their part, don't you think?
Yeah, it's not a conspiracy theory. A lot of people will say, what is this Great Reset? Or you talk about the globalists or the administrative state. These are all conspiracy theories. Even in doing research for the book, it's hard to believe. It's hard to wrap your mind around it. With this new initiative coming out of the World Health Organization, I had Frank Gaffney on from the Center for Security Studies. And as he was presenting the case and sharing the information about what's coming out of the WHO, I said, Frank, you sound like a lunatic. I mean, he sounded like a crazy person. And that's in the wake of COVID. We experienced it. We lived it. I was arrested for peacefully protesting at my state capitol. I was being harassed by the police in Honolulu because I refused to shut down my ministry to the homeless in my community. We had 7-mile-long lines for food in Hawaii. Cars going from Aloha Stadium almost all the way to Kapolei, Hawaii and West Oahu, for those of you who have ever been there. Families in their cars in a 7-mile-long line waiting for food. We all lived through this, and yet it still seems hard to believe when you hear them say things like, you're going to own nothing and like it. Klaus Schwab says with that wonderful accent as if he's from a 1960s Bond movie. You will own nothing and like it. Yeah. Oh, what? Tell me more about this Great Reset. You're going to eat cricket meat and think it's delicious. Wait, what? Come again? I'm not going to have a house. I'm not going to have a car. And I'm going to be eating cricket meat. I mean, it sounds kooky, but we live in a world where you have 3 million Uyghur slaves working for American corporations in Chinese-occupied East Turkestan who work to death and then their organs are harvested. We live in a world where do-gooders drive around in their electric vehicles thinking they're social justice warriors with their message bumper sticker on the back. One of the chapters in my book is on the climate cult and how it's key to the Great Reset. The electric vehicle is not only the biggest polluter on the road, it's a humanitarian catastrophe. Every electric vehicle that is cobalt in every battery, that cobalt comes from Congo. And they have children as young as 6 working in these cobalt mines, digging for cobalt by hand in a toxic mess. And so when you're thinking that they can't be that evil, but they are that evil. They hide the truth about the catastrophe of electric vehicles from you. They sabotage a peace agreement in the biggest war in Europe since World War II. It's erased a generation of young men from Ukraine. They produce the largest famine in the world with the policies surrounding the CCP virus. So this is very serious. So I, sort of like all of my work in the Vulnerable People Project, all the work that we do, at the root of what we do, it's trying to leave for our posterity a culture of life and a civilization of love. A necessary condition for that is, as you said, and I quote C.S. Lewis in the book, is to launch this great campaign of sabotage, and we will succeed.
You go through 5 ideologies in the book, 5 isms, really. And I want you to can you give us the elevator pitch on those? What are the 5 ideologies that you identify as really being a part of the Great Reset and the Global Elite Project?
Yeah, victimism, Gnosticism, transhumanism, and anti-humanism in the climate cult. And the key, and really my goal with this book, I always have, my wife is like, you always give your such modest goals. I said, my goal with this book is to thrust the word victimism into the American lexicon. Like, I really want that word in the dictionary. What is victimism? It's a word coined by Rene Girard, and it's the ideology of concern for the vulnerable to gain wealth, power, and prestige at the expense of the truly vulnerable. And it was coined by Rene Girard. He also, in the 1990s, talked about the victimist Olympics. In the post-Christian world, it really is, it's the triumph of Christianity, where you have to make an appeal to victimism. You have to say, I'm a victim, help. That is the triumph of Christianity. Because you look at the war between Hamas and Israel and Gaza, both sides present themselves as a victim. You can't imagine in a pre-Christian world appealing for help by saying, I'm the weak one here. No. Can you imagine going to Caesar and say, hey, ally with us, Caesar, we're the weak one here? No, that wouldn't happen. So victimism is really the devil's attempt to regroup and still exact retribution on the weak and the vulnerable to rob them of protectors.
One of the things you talk about in the book, and I want to start at climate because I think it's important, is how many people get swept away in all of these things. Like your neighbor whom you thought had common sense, your friend whom you thought had common sense. These were the same people wearing masks in cars, driving around by themselves or walking on a trail by themselves, no one else around, still wearing a mask. It seems like we have been swept away and we have lost all common sense.
The mimetic contagion, the enthusiasms around, for example, COVID, the people are swept away. They're wearing the mask when they're driving their car alone for the same reason, I hope. Where's my scapular? I'm wearing my scapular. It's piety, okay? Unfortunately, their object of piety are the gods of the city and the spirit of the age. And one thing that gives me sympathy and charity, because I'm by nature a very uncharitable and unsympathetic person, but I have to remind myself when they're, yelling at you, put on your mask. It comes from sort of a thoughtless sense of the common good. And that is victimism, right? It's a thoughtless piety to the gods of the city that actually hurts people. It would be fine if it was harmless. But the reality is, when I was arrested leading the first COVID anti-lockdown event in America, I had just written an article called Flatten the Hunger Curve on how if we followed the CCP lockdown model in response to COVID, we would be pushing the poorest people in the world who are already on the brink of starvation into starvation. We're going to be pushing the poorest people in the world who are already on the brink of hunger into hunger. So I led a protest to stop the lockdowns. We failed, obviously, because I was concerned. Now people always say to me, how did you know? How did I know shutting the world down, slowing down food production, processing, and distribution would disproportionately hurt the poorest people on earth? How do I knew? I knew it the same reason I know 2 + 2 is 4. How could I not understand that? People get swept away in these contagions, and that's victimism. Immigration is another example of victimism. They sell chaos at the border as concern for the migrant. Well, I am passionately concerned about migrants. In fact, my entire family is first or second generation. The reality is an open border condemns millions of migrants to being trapped in a dangerous underground economy with no legal protections, separating them from their families a world away, disrupting communities in Honduras and Guatemala and Mexico, disrupting families, fentanyl pouring across the border, killing our children. There's a beautiful new campaign from Catholic Vote called Protect the Vulnerable, Secure the Border. That's courageous solidarity, right? That's courageous solidarity. But victimism is to stand with power. Ecclesiastes 4:1, the saddest verse in the Bible. Solomon said, I looked over the entire world, and all I see is oppression. And on the side of the oppressor is power. But on the side of the oppressed, there is no one. That was the reality when Solomon looked to the world. But the reality today, since the incarnation of Jesus Christ, you could say, I looked all over the world, and all I see is oppression. And on the side of the oppressor is power, is Facebook, is Google, is the governments of the world, New York Times. But on the side of the oppressed is the body of Christ. And if this book were properly titled, and I was just wanting to sell the book to our community, the title would be The Mystical Body of Christ Against the Mystical Body of Antichrist. And the ideologies in this book, these 5 ideologies of evil, transhumanism and anti-humanism, are quite obvious. It's the ideology of the Antichrist. And then the 5 principles that we need to look to respond to the ideologies of the Great Reset really emanate from 2,000 years of Catholics meditating and praying on what does it mean for God to make us in his image? What does it mean for the second person of the Trinity to become incarnate as man and then to suffer and die for us and then to be resurrected? What does that have to do with me, with my neighbor, with my relationship to the environment and to the rest of the human family? So really a proper title, but I would have only been able to sell it on Catholic radio, would have been The Mystical Body of Christ, The Mystical Body of Antichrist. But really, this is a war on the world. And to break the Great Reset is to break the cordon. As these forces of evil to circle the world, we need everyone to push back where they are in their industry, in their community, their religious, through the religious communities.
Elon Musk and Bill Gates, they both have and neither one, I got issues with Elon Musk as well, but at the same time, both have very different outlooks and they're contrasted to each other. Can you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, so there's 2 young boys. It's really interesting. And obviously, Elon Musk has a lot of problems, right? But he's an interesting character. But he is the anti-human agenda. Elon Musk is the most aggressive advocate against demographic decline. This man is railing against demographic decline. And it goes to when he was a little boy. It's quite interesting. He said when he was a little boy, he loved having a big family. He wanted a big family. He wanted everyone to have a big family. He thought there's nothing more wonderful in the world than a big family. But one day, if all of us on Earth keep having big families, we're going to run out of space. We're going to run out of resources. So little Elon said, you know what we need to do? Colonize the universe. We need to fly out to the planet, colonize Mars. And so the Elon Musk followed that vision. There was another little boy, a very privileged little boy, lived in Washington State. His father was on the board of Planned Parenthood. He went to a very prestigious school where he had one of the earliest educations in computer programming. I think he went to the only school in the world at the time where he could actually program computers, learn how to program computers in school. It's detailed in a wonderful book by Malcolm Gladwell called Outliers. And this little boy's name was Bill Gates, and his dad was on the board of Planned Parenthood. Bill Gates also was worried that if human beings kept having all these children, he would run out of resources. And he became obsessed with population control. So you sort of have these two distinct characters on the world stage.
Did you like that video? It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here because you don't want to miss anything.